been a hell of a bad week for the centenarians among us, so thank goodness we've made it to Friday. This is the week that was. I'm Giulietta Talevi, and my guest this evening is Simon Brown. Simon, when I wrote our introduction, I still thought David Shapiro was coming, notwithstanding his crystal challenge that he had to present. And I thought that bright Kamala was with us, except, of course, he's getting married.
He's getting married. And patently, neither of us are winning crystal challenge, otherwise we would be somewhere getting awards.
Yeah, exactly. So clearly we came very far down on the list.
Yes.
I don't think my Tiger Brands and Glencore stock picks did me many favours at all.
I also had Tiger Brands.
What were we thinking?
It was looking good, and we thought it would get bought out.
In fact, actually, it would be interesting to. David Shapiro was tweeting yesterday about the differences between those who won his Crystal Challenge and the rest of us at the bottom. And there were some huge variations. You know, and if you had maybe backed the gold shares, you'd be smiling. So there were pockets on the JSE this year in which you could have made a grand load of cash, but they were very few and far between.
There were few far between. They were gold, which is always weird. I have this. I'm bullish on gold, and it just
disturbs you
deeply. I can't sleep well at night at the moment. But November was not bad. I mean, if you remember, what was it? 12 Jan, we hit all-time highs. The world was. We said on this show, let's close the market and go home. But November wasn't a bad month. I mean, we actually, not year to date, but over the last 12 months, including dividends, we're up about 7.5%. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like we're down 30. It's been a grind of a year, and it hasn't been spectacular. It's been okay.
Yeah. Although I think the last week has soured the mood from a lot of the company reports that came out. Some of the trading updates clearly rattled people, and we'll get to those in the second half. But the thing that worries me at the moment is that supposedly the dollar is being sold off, everyone's dumping it, and yet the rand is as weak as it is. And that suggests that there is still a bearish sentiment on South Africa, and it always seems to coincide with stage 6 load shedding, but it just seems that there are that many more issues now. You know, we've got Transnet to worry about, which we didn't at the start of the year. So it feels like this is all self-inflicted pain taking place.
It is. I mean, we are the worst BRICS currency over the year. Remember, one of those nations is at war as the aggressor, and our currency has done worse than the ruble. It is just, we are being it does feel like we're being squeezed. Stage 6 absolutely never helps. I was chatting with Old Mutual Investment Group CIO yesterday, and I forget the phrase. He had a very nice phrase for South Africa. Not nice, clever phrase, because it's. But he talks around, for example, the privatization by stealth. You know, we're not privatizing Eskom, but we are, because everyone's putting solar panels and batteries and stuff like that. Yeah. And they're expecting a tough couple of years.
Well, also making news this week, the ANC's populist rhetoric is in full pre-election flow. Scrap the Eskom debts, buy the traditional leaders a double cab, and roll out the red carpet for the Chinese generators. Who cares if it destroys the planet? There's a cheap Chinese clothing emporium on its way to the IPO market, and the punters will lap it up. South Africa's steel belt is hanging on by a thread. Implats is scarred by a week of tragedy. Elon Musk tells the advertisers what he really thinks of them. Treasury has found a few billion for Transnet, and results out this week show the private sector gasping for air. But first, many here won't be mourning the passing of Henry Kissinger, but the plaudits for Charlie Munger were universal. How could they not, given such easy, gentle wisdom as this?
It's so simple to spend less than you earn and invest shrewdly and avoid toxic people and toxic activities and try and keep learning all your life, et cetera, and do a lot of deferred gratification because you prefer life that way. And if you do all those things, you are almost certain to succeed. And if you don't, you're going to need a lot of luck. And you don't want to need a lot of luck. You want to go into a game where you're very likely to win without having any unusual luck.
I mean, if that's not a maxim for living a good life, I don't know what is.
He was 99. Him and Buffett. Probably my entire career, I've known that they were close to the end. I think we've had way more than we could have hoped for, and we are remarkably lucky. My favorite quote from him is they're talking about remuneration committees. Berkshire Hathaway keeps on putting directors on the RemComs, and they get kicked off. And Buffett's like, they want chihuahuas, but we send Dobermans. And sorry to the people we're insulting. And Munger says, I think you're insulting the dogs. But you know, there's been a ton of quotes going around from him, and he speaks about it there. We talk about learning, and it it is. I mean, we learn every day, particularly in this industry. There's always something which you're like, didn't know that, I'm smarter for it. But he almost talks about conscious learning. In other words, almost like having it as I don't know, like breakfast. Like set aside 20 minutes to read a challenging book or a long read or something like that, to make it much more formalized. But it's a generation which is not many left, eh?
No, indeed, and I suppose the other question now, so aside from the years of wisdom, which hopefully people will have absorbed, is what happens to Berkshire Hathaway. And it has been an astounding performance. I mentioned on Wednesday nights that the stats that the FT ran, I had to reread them at first. I thought, this can't be possible, that between 1964 and 2022, Berkshire Hathaway's compound return was 3.8 million %. And the S&P 500 was 22,000.
Which is a good number in itself. But
yeah, that does suggest when you put those two, it's not just luck. I talked about not having luck in life. It's been an extraordinary company, and I wonder if it will be able to continue what its founders have done for us.
I don't know. I mean, they don't pay dividends. They're just like not interested. You want money, sell shares. You know what? It's just that way. They've got the flexibility to do as they wanted. And that's because when people started noticing them, probably about 20 or so years ago, and we discovered this amazing company called Berkshire Hathaway, they had the track record which gave them the permission to say, it's our way or the highway. And I remember, maybe 2005 or 6, that had a tough couple of years. And I didn't write the article, but I went, because no one was publishing me, I went and did the research, and their returns were under S&P. And I thought, maybe it's over. Maybe the Berkshire Hathaway Munger Buffett thing is all over. And for a while, the numbers supported me. But no, they came back in a I don't know, 4th, 5th, 6th innings and just kept knocking out the park. It's an astounding testament to buy the quality, have your convictions, and hold, what's your favorite waiting period? Forever. It absolutely works. And I think for fund managers today, few are afforded that opportunity.
Yeah. Well, if only what Munger called uncommon sense was remotely present in the SA government. Instead, we've had the unedifying spectacle of Kumbudza and Javeni doubling down a bald-faced lie from the uber-populist Panyaza Goebbels Lessufi that the debt you owe us, Eskom, is a thing of the past, and the absolute pig-headed attachment to the worst piece of legislation yet to come out of South Africa, the NHI, now mysteriously delayed at the National Council of Provinces.
We cannot have a situation where actually, as I said, in a participatory democracy, nobody's views, I don't just mean businesses' views, nobody's views are taken into consideration in legislation which, with some small amendments, we believe can make, broadly speaking, fit for purpose. We're not suggesting that the legislation should be scrapped. We're saying it should be amended appropriately, taking into consideration the views and the opinions that have already been received over a 2-year period.
So that was Martin Kingston there talking about how, and there's been huge amounts of comment and a huge amount of very justified concern, and it was just ignored. And this is a public consultation process. That's, ideally you'd like to go back to the beginning, scrap the whole thing, but the ANC seems very reluctant to do it. Why do they attach themselves to what is such a potentially damaging piece of legislation?
I think it's almost become the ANC psyche, right, which is, we just know best. They're not leadership, they're parents type of thing. And they're not. They are leadership. They're politicians who we can vote in or out at any point in time. But they seem to view themselves, and I think this is even, pre-democracy. They felt themselves as the appointed, and they still feel that. It's the vanguard idea, which of course is the Marxist concept, which is where they got a lot of their understandings from. And it is, we know best. The whole consultation process, as Kingston said there, ignored.
Sham.
Just absolutely a sham. I mean, it's going to, national health insurance, no one says it isn't a good idea. Of course it is. We need something to work. It's just in the current form, there are enough people out there who are smart enough, and yes, some vested interests, but that's not always the case, saying, this isn't working, we can make some tweaks, let's make it happen. This is going to be years in the courts. And why does the ANC want that, and how do they think they can win this? The courts have shown themselves to be independent.
Well, we're still scratching our heads over the decision to have yet another UN climate summit, COP28, in a petrostate, as the BBC writes. Evidence that the UAE team planned to use climate talks ahead of COP28 to do oil and gas deals has heightened concerns. You don't say. Here's the man himself.
The UAE is deeply proud and humbled to be hosting COP28 at a pivotal time in this critical decade for climate action. We know, as you know, the gravity of this moment. We feel, as you feel, the urgency of this work. And we see, as you see, that the world has reached a crossroads.
That all is the right thing to say and sounds the right thing to say, but I'm sort of baffled as to how petrostates such as the UAE can walk themselves away from the very things that underpin their economies and their practically their raison d'être.
Greenwashing. But to your point, Giulietta, you know, should we say to the UAE, you can't come to the table because, you know, you're part of the problem?
Obviously.
Of course not. But should we say to the UAE, guys, you're really part of the problem, and you've got, you know, nice country you got here. I don't know, how's a little bit of help or something? And I appreciate their complexities and the stuff here. But this whole, I mean, when I saw that it was going to be in the UAE, I assumed it was an Onion article or something. It didn't for a second occur to me that they really were going to the heart of the problem. And then I thought, well, because the UAE is going to build the biggest solar farm in the Sahara Desert or something, you know, some contrition, some note to that as well. It just seems that
oil and gas deals are on the table still.
Yes.
Yes, and will be for a very long time.
Yes, forever and a day.
And could we let the show pass without the mention of the little generators that arrived on our shores to great fanfare yesterday? No, we could not. Monty Python couldn't really match the script for sheer tawdry spectacle, not to mention a cringe factor that was practically nuclear. Our Minister of Electricity rolling out the red carpet for 450 cheap-ass generators because, you know, we can't produce the stuff ourselves.
They really were cheap-ass generators.
They're little ones.
They're the baby ones that I could power my laptop and 2 lights, but not
and a kettle, maybe.
A kettle, but not a stove.
No.
No.
Well, well, unless it's a very little stove.
Well, a gas stove.
But it just, you thought this is an admission of failure, and you, I mean, this is not a PR campaign that you should be proud of or attaching your name to.
Correct. Much like there was that opening of a tap earlier this week.
Yes, indeed.
So we're, 5 months away from the election.
Is this going to fool anyone?
Somebody, somewhere. No, I mean, someone out there got a generator, right? 450 people got a generator. Maybe that's 320 votes. I don't know. It's barrel scraping.
Absolutely. After the break, the weekend companies. Stay with us.